Today, we have a special guest, Noah Lang, who's an incredible independent film producer. And he's going to be wrapping out our How to Sell Your Script series of podcasts with some really helpful advice, not only about the sales process, but also about the development process from the producer's point of view. Welcome, Noah.
How are you?
I am fantastic. So, you just finished a really interesting film. This is not a war story. And I thought it would be a wonderful interview for our final podcast in the Sell Your Script series, because this is not like a likely movie, and I think, a lot of new writers think, selling a script is about selling out or doing something that's obviously commercial. So I'm curious, like, what's the origin story of This Is Not a War Story? How did this happen?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's a couple parts here that'll be fun to unpack. And the first thing I would say is that, so Talia Lugassi, who wrote it, directed it, and she's actually one of the leads in it. She produced it with me. She's a force of nature, and I love her. She's so talented. We met in New York and Brooklyn years ago, and she was developing this. It was called 8,000 Shots at the time. And just the rawness of it, the realness of it all, I was in, and my family has a kind of history of interest in veterans issues. And, me as a person of progressive politics leaning person was interested in it. But more so than anything was here's this filmmaker that is going to get this done come hell or high water, which are, as a producer, is kind of what you're looking for. Those people that are unstoppable. So that was sort of the impetus of diving in. And we were in the fortunate position of there was private financing to do it at a very small level, which what I would say about that is that, in terms of what you were saying, is that we made it for the number that the quote market could sustain doing a film like this, right?
Yes.
Like there's obviously massive exceptions for dramas justifying much larger budgets, et cetera. And those tend to be, star driven and, A-list directors and, Academy Awards fodder and things like that. Whereas in this case, the calculus for someone like me is like, well, this is a filmmaker I want to work with. I love this project, and I think we can grow together and keep doing things together. And so she also had the benefit of her first film was a Tribeca Film Festival selection. It was a New York Times Critics pick. It starred Rosario Dawson, who then executive produced this with us. So we had some kind of good strategic elements to be able to play with. And so kind of jumped into the deep end on that one rather quickly. And it's a film that we're incredibly proud of. We managed to sell it to HBO. We've got an Independent Spirit Award nomination for it. Good reviews at New York Times, Roger Ebert, Film Threat, Hammered to Nail, all sorts of nice places. And but it's also, now that we're sort of heading towards the end of its initial life cycle, it'll, obviously keep doing its thing for a long time, but is that it's also the tool that we use for the next thing, which is, still it has her kind of her identity, but is slightly more commercial, and it has a slightly different set of ambitions, et cetera. And I think, like, in terms of a lot of what you talk about on this series, like, is that there are different benchmarks for what, quote, selling your script is, right? Like in a way, it's almost like making your script. Like you're getting something made, and that being able to make it is one step towards being able to do more things that you like to do. And a lot of writers have very disparate interests. A lot of them have very similar ones. Like, I say, like a lot, I really admire the Benson and Moorhead, who made, The Endless and Resolution and Spring. And, whereas what I saw there was they kind of were very deliberate about a progression in size of movies so that they could, keep taking those steps to be able to get to the place that they ultimately wanted to be and do interesting things along the way. So This Is Not a War Story to me is a good bottle example of, like, well, we can do a lot of our greater ambitions within the framework of, a film of this size. And it sort of stands as a testament to what we think is possible for projects going forward.
Yeah. And I love what you said about the unstoppable force. One of my very talented students is an entrepreneur. He used to be an angel investor, and I'm always interested in these kinds of things. So I was asking about, like, when you've got all these different people pitching you projects that can make money, how do you know which one to choose? And he said, it's so simple, Jake. He's like, I choose the one who is gonna do it even if I don't give him a dollar. Because that's the one who's actually going to succeed. And I think it's really cool, today, like when I was coming up, you had to shoot on film, and today it's become so much more accessible for people to actually say, hey, I'd like your money, I'd like your support, but if I don't have it, I'm actually going to do this anyway.
Yeah. No, totally. And there's, what's nice too is that because of the, the prevalence of the internet and social media and the way that we engage with all kinds of content, like the ability to be able to do things at a smaller scale that, adhere to larger goals, like, where you see a lot of, there's a pretty tried and true model of proof of concept short films becoming the features, or these kind of micro horror shorts that are extrapolated, like Lights Out, or I'm forgetting the name of the one. The short was called Larry, but that's sort of become a tried and true method, and that wasn't possible, a while back, right? And now it is, and it's a model that I've used several times. We did that on a movie called Minor Premise. We did it on a movie called The Strange Ones. We're doing it again on we did it on a movie called The Climb. And but anyway, the point really is like there's like availability of incubating ideas now that wasn't there before, and in a kind of broader sense, like my experience with selling things at the studio level has had as many frustrations as I'm sure you've had, and that many of your students have had, with several successes and a lot of just frustrations and confusion, right? And I do think that what's interesting about meeting with talented young writers who is sort of an element of education about like, well, look, like, you can also be thinking in terms of like producers like myself who are motivated to get movies made at a modest number because we're trying to grow with our filmmakers. I'm not independently wealthy, so I can't finance movies myself, but I can be, in the foxhole with you, and I can fight to get the thing made. And together we can, we can watch each other's back and, kind of, progress up the chain and get stuff done. And that's happened in certain instances in my career. And I think that that's sometimes something that gets lost in the way that people romanticize being a screenwriter, right? That everything is going to be Andrew Kevin Walker's Seven, like I'm going to be at a video store, someone's going to ask for my script, boom, I gotta, I'm suddenly, I'm a made man. But there's a million ways to cut it up, right? Like you just sort of have to have a sort of an openness to how that can look and what you define as a success.
Yeah. And I think there's so much value to what you're saying about like finding your people. And yet, sure, if you happen to bump into Martin Scorsese and he's interested in your script, that's freaking great. But, it may actually be the people in your generation or the people who are like one step beyond where you are, where you were a month ago or a year ago, that are actually hungry for that new content.
Yeah. And that like motivation and thinking, I think is a really nice thing to have top of mind in basically every interaction you have in the industry. Is like, sometimes going to a more junior agent about, an actor or someone like that can benefit you because they're trying to find a way to look really smart and, have like they've got their eyes on something that everyone else doesn't know about, or it's like I started as an assistant 11 years ago at a company called Cinetic, and like we all the assistants, we were all kind of like trading intel and and that's where you like build your kind of groundswell of like your tribe inside the industry. And like, and then in just a greater sense, to your point, is like you got to find your people because it's a really lonely business otherwise, and like you guys can find ways to help each other, and whether it's sharing information or sharing contacts or, helping each other get your scripts better, or, designing decks, or help someone who can help write a budget, all those things like can help. And like, I recognize I'm talking a little bit more about like kind of the back end of like, putting a movie together more so than like selling your script. But, I've found things in the past where, brought the director to it and we've gotten to make it that weren't just, a lot of people think of indie producing as only writers, directors, and it's not always. There's this whole realm of making things that's completely disparate from that studio side of things and the Sundance-ness of it all, you know.
Yeah, no, I actually think what you're sharing is really valuable because I think you're kind of demystifying this a little bit, you know, and yeah, it's a little bit more gritty and real than like the fairy tale story, which happens too, where someone grabs your script and suddenly you're rich. But you know, also sometimes somebody grabs your script and suddenly you're rich, and then 15 years later, your movie still isn't made, you know, and there's tremendous value in going like, how do we do this? You know, how do we put ourselves in a position where people can't say no to us? Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious when somebody approaches you, like a new writer, somebody that you don't know. What is the balance between being obnoxious and being unstoppable? Like how do you like to be approached by new writers?
I mean, I wish I had a one size fits all answer. I will say that there are a number of people that clearly send like blast emails to like everyone who has their email listed on IMDb. Mine's not even listed there anymore, but somehow I'm still getting these from a lot of these same writers that are sending me these same log lines. And it's like, that drives me crazy is like, but like if someone finds me and has a personal touch to it, like, I really, really, really love You're Alone, or seeing how you guys pulled things off with The Climb really moved me, or it like has sort of there's like oh, you actually want to talk to me because you think that there's some sort of shared ethos or philosophy or whatever it is. That's I'm like, okay, I respect and appreciate that. I understand where you're coming from, and I can't guarantee I'll like your script or read it because there's a bajillion, but like people have found me through cold outreach. This guy, Brandon Weevil, we've been working with, who's just great, totally found us through the grapevine, and he's a wildly talented horror writer with crazy batshit ideas. But like, that's like what I'm looking for, because there's no lack of just like, fun, elevated genre things out there. But like, we really like what I want to find like Hereditary. I don't want to find, another, not that there's anything wrong with the kind of mainstream horror world. It's very cool and fun and popcorny, but like trying to find things that become like a singular piece within a very crowded marketplace right now. But so to go back to your question, if you have a really compelling log line and are personal in your outreach, I'll be much more receptive for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really valuable. Like so many people, I think a lot of the pitch fests kind of amplify this. You know, we think it's like Shark Tank, where it's about this like song and dance, but it's really not. It's about connecting with another human being. It's about like knowing who you are before you start trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
I'm also curious, particularly on This Is Not a War Story, you took a really unique approach to the development of that piece. And so I would love to give my writers like a little peek behind the door of like, what does the development process look like on a piece like that that's not being created in the traditional Hollywood model?
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about it as like a broader sample, right, of like, or example of what you're talking about is the idea of building trust within a community that you're then going to represent, whether it's in a film or in the script that you hope to make into a film. And so what Talia did in that instance was she had the framework of characters that she realized fit into the context of the veteran experience of trauma and PTSD. And so she built the trust with those communities to do that. And it took a long time. And, she's remarkable for having fought to do that, and built these relationships across the years with them. But that's what translates into the movie being great. And a big part of the movie's identity is being upset with the mainstream representation of the military and coming home from warfare, and the lack of true representation of the issues of moral injury and post-traumatic stress and suicidal ideation and stuff. And I recognize everything I just said sounds not commercial, but like making stuff right now, like you need to do things that have a huge impact, and also like something I always say is I'm like, in my opinion, the market doesn't know what it wants, right? Like the great example right now is like the Squid Game one, where everyone keeps being like, everyone passed on Squid Game, and it's like, yeah, like in a way that happens every other week. Is like something that doesn't make sense on paper is like the soup du jour. So, and I would say that about ours, but in a greater example for how to like to give your writers and your listeners, more how a peek behind the curtain could help is that if you're writing about something that has to do with something real, of real subculture, real group of people, like get involved and understand that, like figure out ways to get that authenticity. Because when you have that within something, like the pages like sing them, even if you're like a raw writer, if you're writing from a real place, like I'm terrible at pulling examples off the top of my head, but like when you have people who come from a specific like background or community, like law enforcement or the military or medicine, et cetera, who write something because of experiences they went through, like those stories tend to be like intense and really interesting. And part of me is probably like, I bet you multiple drafts of that script were like nonsense, the writing was bad, the structure was impossible to decipher, but it had a lot of integrity because it was real.
Yeah.
So I would say the more you can pull from the authenticity of what you're writing about, like the better. Like that can only help you.
Yeah, I always feel like you want to feel like this is the only writer in the world who could have written this script.
Yes,
You're
that's
looking
a really, really good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love what you're talking about with voice. Again, I think so. This is really even true. I worked for many years on the Hollywood side of things, and even there, it was always true. When you're working with a famous writer, it's often about hook. Like, all right, what's the pitch? But when you are working with a newer writer, it's always about voice. Because at some level, you're going to have to go to bat, and you're going to have to fight. You're going to have to fight for this person, and you're not going to have like, well, their last movie made this much money, so it's got to be provocative in some way. I'm curious, what are you looking for right now? Like, what excites you most?
Oh man, I mean, I always say that I kind of am like, as much as it's a cop out, like I kind of love everything. Like I do, like probably, favorite movies of all time are like, Terminator 2 and like Airplane and Aliens, but then like I'm obsessed with, you know, like Place Beyond the Pines is one of my favorites. I love rural thrillers. I love contained sci-fi. Like if someone ever had an idea like Cube again, that would be like my favorite thing ever.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, like what's interesting to me is like things that feel infinitely makeable. Like where it's like you look at something like The Guilty with Jake Gyllenhaal and the original foreign language film, and I go like, this is a dream because it's compelling. It's a good actor's piece. It's a thriller. And you could do this in 15 days anywhere in the country as long as you have your location. And not because it's like I don't want to do ambitious things, but like sometimes you just have to be thinking practically. And like I've with filmmakers I work with have made the sales at studio levels that require all these massive levers to be able to happen. And I think there's a lot of virtue to writing and trying to produce things that can be done at a modest level that have opportunities for good actors and can be done. So I'd say I'm really interested in contained right now, and within any genre, thriller, sci-fi, horror, especially I would say like thrillers. Frankly, I would love to do a contained thriller. But yeah, and like I look at like I even think of things like Shotgun Stories, like Jeff Nichols' first movie, like The Interview, this old Australian movie with Hugo Weaving, like where you can take stakes and do it within a certain confines. So yeah, that's me right now. And then I my hope is always to try and find and identify like voices that I think are going to be really like have a lot to say. So that's like I don't have, like I said before, I don't have money, so I can but I can like help nurture talent of different kinds. I think that's something that I'm good at. And I tend to work with my filmmakers again. So not a lot of producers have that experience.
Well, I mean, I think your resume speaks for itself. Your IMDb
Thank
speaks
you.
for itself. Like,
So
it's easy to have a lot of producing credits if you have a ton of money, but when what you're really showing is, hey, you can go out and fight for a project, and you can make things, and you can make things that are unlikely. If you put the right team together and you know how to proceed with that. So I'm curious, for a writer who wants to produce their own script, maybe it's a short, maybe it's a low budget contained feature. What do you think the most common mistakes are that people make when it comes to producing? And what should the writer, let's assume they have no experience, they've never even thought of producing something before.
yeah.
What are the most important things for them to think about?
Well, I think, I really appreciate the ethos of like go, 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 like just make stuff, move fast and break things and the tech jargon. But for people that don't like haven't done it a lot or at all, what I would say is that there tends to be a lack of like respect for the necessity of very, very good people doing the traditional jobs. Like, don't hire your buddy who wants to be a DP someday. Like, try and find that, like spend hours on Vimeo finding, I found the, greatest young DP who's never shot a feature, maybe he hasn't even done narrative, but he's got an incredible eye. I think he could do something really, or she could do something really special with this. Is like, take the time for those things, to get those things right, and like, don't shoot on all white walls, and like, find ways to make the scenes they're inhabiting feel like rich and real. And if it's like an elevated idea, obviously just try and really flex with like things, like even if you feel like you can't, think about ways to make the production design feel bigger. If you're going to stay really tight, do some things in the background that make it sing, or whatever it is. Like, just take the time to ensure you can get some people in the trenches with you that bring a lot of like just straight up qualitative like skills to it. You just want something that looks really good, like, and acting as well. And the nice thing about acting is there's no lack of actors and there's no lack of talented actors that would love to just make stuff. You just need to be patient in finding them. So also, don't cast your friends necessarily unless they're very good actors, in which case absolutely do it.
It's really true, right? Like, all of life is casting. That's the secret of life, right? That you surround yourself with amazing people, and they elevate you, and you put one person that's the wrong fit, and it will bring the whole production down.
Yeah.
And I love what you're saying. I think I've seen so many new producers really shortchange themselves on pre-production, right? Like racing through pre-production because they want to get it made so bad, but the less money you have, the less important it is. Like, the more important it is that your DP is incredible, the more important it is that your line producer is incredible, that your sound person is incredible, that your stars are incredible. So I think that's an amazing piece of advice.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's just about margins of error. They get smaller, the lower your budget gets. So
Yeah.
the more prepared you are for, any, unforeseen thing that could come up, like the better. If like there's a really cool movie called The Incident at Sparrow Creek, which is like a standoff movie. And like, I remember that the filmmaker apparently made like a whole Bible that was just like everything, from like all of the, and I haven't met him. I'm just sort of like quoting what I've heard secondhand.
Yeah.
But it was like the entire film, like what we're feeling and seeing and everything. And I was like, see, that guy gets it. Like, if that took him 5 years, then like when he has his 20 days to make the thing, like he's already made it in his head a million times. And it's not just in his head. Here's like a physical document that's like, this is the thing.
Yeah.
It's like, some actors create their binders for each role that's like research and their own writings and things like that. And you're like, here's a thing I can hold that like tells me what I need to do. But I only bring that up insofar as like, yeah, just being like prepared for how to do something. And the more things that you do, like the more that you learn and more are capable of talking about. And like, if you do eventually like, or just, want to get to a position where you can just straight up sell a script, like that's how you get there in my mind. It's like, don't it's not winning the lottery. It's like, it's punching a time card, like, finding ways to to get your name out there a little bit. And something I've told people before is like, yeah, you make something like, it doesn't matter how small or seemingly insignificant the festival is, like, go meet people, hand out you give your email, try and chat with people. Like, if one in 50 people is worth knowing, then it was worth doing it. So
Yeah.
and that's how I think you get to the position you want to be in, like in any creative position in entertainment, is like, put yourself out there as much as possible.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you probably the most common question that I hear about
Sure.
what do I do? So a lot of times, a writer, they get their script to a producer. The producer goes, I'm so excited to read this, or an agent or a manager, I'm so excited to read this. And then they never hear again. And I always get the question from the writer, like, do I send him an email? Do I call? What is too frequent? What is not frequent enough? How much pushing should I do? And I'm curious, how do you like to be interacted with by a writer when you've got their project, you've got a million things to read? What's the best way for them to handle that?
I am not against the follow up at all, because it's like, it's not like I have an assistant. There's a lot of things going on. So like, if someone sends, it's been 3 weeks or something, and they're like, hey, have you been able to look at this in a polite way? Because it's like, I'm obviously not I am not reading it because I don't want to or am lazy or whatever. It's like, in all likelihood, I completely forgot. Maybe I opened it and it's one of 700. I have like 15 PDFs open right now, like, and just spaced. So like, a polite follow up is totally fine. The thing to avoid is like, when it's like, hey, don't read that. I got like a new. It's like, when you're gonna send something, be like, this is the thing I want you to read. So I would say that, there is so much, and also like, saying something like, look, if you don't have time to read it right now, would it be okay if I contacted you in a couple of months? And like, sometimes people like myself would really appreciate that, because the person reaching out doesn't know what I am or the other people being reached out to or dealing with. It can be like, I'm dealing with a lot of chaos and finishing up a couple of projects right now. So I'm not reading as much as I would like, but they have no way of knowing that. So if you offer them a little bit of grace, I think that's a good thing. So, but definitely, like, follow up. You shouldn't be afraid of that. Like, just be polite and recognize that everyone's got lives and disparate concerns to deal with at any given time, and it should be all fine.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful piece of advice. And so I wonder, we're about to wrap up. So is there anything else you'd like to share about This Is Not a War Story before we wrap?
Yeah, I mean, I say a lot. Like, I think it's one of the, if not the most, one of the most like, rewarding experiences in my career. And I think a big part of that is like, you know, it's always fun to make things. I mean, within, sometimes it's not so fun, but the outcome is always fun, right? You got to have something, and got all these posters on my wall. But it's much better when it's something that has a lot of impact and meaning to people, and it's translated in that way. And I think that when people watch it, they recognize that. So it's if you have HBO Max, it's available now on HBO Max. In 6 or so months, we'll be doing a special edition Blu-ray, and in a couple of years, it'll be on AVOD, like Crackle and Tubi and Vudu and all that. But until then, it's exclusive to HBO. So if you got HBO, please watch it. And if you plan to watch the Spirit Awards, they're March 6th, and we're nominated for the John Cassavetes Award. It'll be on IFC. So would appreciate it if anyone watched.
That's incredible, Noah. Congratulations on that. And I appreciate that's such a wonderful place to end, right? Because so often when people think about producers, they forget that producers are also artists, right? And that like producers get into this business, sure, they'd like to make money, but producers get into this business because they want to say something too. And remembering that like your art is about what you want to say. It's not just about what you could sell. If it was just about what you could sell, you could make a lot more money, selling any kind of merchandise. So, I really love kind of ending on that spiritual side of things. Like, say something that matters to you. and then go find somebody who wants to say something similar. And that's how you find your tribe, like you were talking about.
Yeah. Look, there are a lot of dirtbag producers out there. I will not deny it. But a buddy of mine has kind of quoted it as, like most producers aren't like mustache twirling supervillains. They're like, yeah, they're filmmakers that, want to help advocate for stories and figure out doing something that's really difficult. And like, directors are some of the most important and special people in the world. And they need people like us to be able to understand how to get through all this, right? And I think everybody needs everyone in this industry. And there's, I think, too much like so-and-so is the problem or so-and-so is the problem. It's like we all would, it's a miracle anything works. And like, we're all like, in the fight together. So I hope that people can have a bit of like grace towards, the process of getting anything made, because it's so Herculean to do it. So yeah, we're not all like, look, we all want to make money because we all got to make a living. I have, my second kid on the way, so like, got to make money. But it's also like there's a world where you can, have integrity and also, make a living.
Yeah. Well, thank you for such an inspiring interview. And I really appreciate your time. Good luck with the Cassavetes Award.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks so much, Noah. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. If you're digging this material, you are our promotion. So please like, follow, subscribe. We are so grateful to have you as part of our community. And if you want to study with us, you can do it for free every Thursday night. WriteYourScreenplay.com/Thursday.